What's up, everybody? Anybody? Just seeing what's going on here. I got some people in there. This is first time streaming, so be a little patient with me. You guys let me know if you got audio in the chat. Okay. So, well, I'm not getting anybody responding in the chat. Can you guys hear me? All right, sweet. Sam, you're the man. Okay, so I'm gonna go over some of the stuff today about this SVP collapse. We're gonna go over the Patrick Bet David podcast yesterday. Pretty interesting podcast, I thought. So I'm gonna go ahead and start playing this, and I'll stop and put my thoughts in as it goes.
Having said that, I say we just get right into it with the main topic that everybody is talking about, which is Silicon Valley Bank, 16th largest bank in America to go fail. The last time this happened was, I believe, WAMU. And I remember WAMU was a roughly $330 billion company that Chase ended up buying for $1.9 billion. If you want to zoom this in so we can take a look at this, zoom it in so people can see exactly the charts. Rob, if you're doing it that way, we can't see it.
By the way, when did we have the former CEO of WAMU?
Yeah, we had him on. We had him on a few months ago.
That was a few, and that was what talk about timing. That's,
Yeah.
you've gone on and on about what happened with WAMU and how disappointed
And he
him
was.
a little
You
bit.
remember what happened afterwards in the interview? How upset his wife was and how upset him. I was like, listen,
his wife was not happy.
this you did. This is you CEO. This is why we're asking you. Right there's WAMU. If you look at the chart on the left, and the one on the right. If you can zoom in again, Rob, what you just did is fine. No, do what you did. Just go to the
forward a little bit here.
Was seized by regulators on Friday, making it the second biggest bank.
Yeah. So this is the
when somebody
biggest
deposits
crash
money in
we've
your
had
bank,
since
you don't have
2008.
all those assets on hand. You keep roughly 10%. The rest you lend out to try and make the arbitrage, to try and make the spread. That's how banks make money. The problem is that a lot of these investments were now underwater. You see, when you invest in a lot of the bonds that they invested in mortgage-backed securities. So a 3% mortgage equals a 2% coupon because everybody takes it.
All right. So one of the big things everybody's got to understand is how this collapse happened. This wasn't like 2008 where these guys had a bunch of bad bets on their books. These bets were fine until the Fed started raising interest rates. They had bought government bonds, which, according to the Dodd-Frank Act, are not considered realized. They're not realized losses, and they don't have to be reported on their sheets at the end of the year. So they had all these unrealized losses, which would have been fine had the Fed not raised the interest rates the way they did. So that's where everything started to go bad. So let's get back into this a little bit.
A piece. So 2% coupons, I'm getting 2%. That's okay if I'm paying a half of 1%. I'm making money on it. Okay. However, what starts to happen is as the Fed has maniacally raised rates without thinking about the consequences, they're not very good at unintended consequences. They now give people alternatives to move their money. So now you can move your money to a short-term 6-month treasury and get 5%. So people start withdrawing money. Tech companies were doing a little bit more poorly, as we know. They start having less capital going in. So what happens is that the bank now has to make up this money. Where do they get it from? They have to now sell assets. Here's the real craziness of it. They had on their books
is really key.
$12 billion
what happened.
positive, but it really wasn't.
Right
Because
here,
once you
he breaks
started
it
looking
down really well.
what they had was invested in these bonds that were now underwater. Under Dodd-Frank, these are considered now to be no-risk assets. So you do not have to report under Dodd-Frank unrealized losses. They had 15 billion in unrealized losses. This was not a solvent bank. There were 3 billion unsolvent as at the end of last year, which is why the CEO.
Stop this real quick. Pay special attention to what he said there. Under Dodd-Frank, they did not have to report these losses. That's really key because the big talking point going around, Biden talked about it during his speech yesterday morning, the big talking point going around was this is because of Trump. This is because Trump rolled back the regulations on these regional banks during his presidency. This is not true. This is a flat out lie. It's verifiably a lie. Dodd-Frank itself would not have stopped this. These losses were not required to be declared publicly under the Dodd-Frank Act. And, you know, the fact that Senator Frank of the Dodd-Frank Act was on the board of Signature Bank, another bank that went down, should tell you, you know, he wrote the legislation. I'm sure he's going to operate within it. You would think, you would hope. In our society, you never know. It seems like the politicians get away with whatever they want, but you know, you'd hope that he'd at least make his shady money within the rules that he wrote. So let's keep going here.
Was selling stock, which is why you had insiders getting paid bonuses up front and early. Now they start to get exposed because Jim Cramer, an amazing 5 weeks ago, touts this as the stock you got to buy. Okay, it is.
Stop it. Jim Cramer was out there
Look
doing
at
this thing again.
February. I swear to you,
Wait, no,
February.
pull up the video.
We got the video.
Is this the same Jim Cramer that compared Sam Bankman-Fried to Rockefeller or to Andrew Carnegie?
There's actually an ETF, which is a contrary to Jim Cramer. But anyway,
Yeah, this is really funny. If you are in the markets, if you do any sort of investment, I'd check out that ETF that runs contrary to Jim Cramer, because he seems to be losing epically lately. So keep an eye on that ETF. Not financial advice, just funny coincidence from a stupid guy on the internet. So here we go.
Really on point here.
I'm sending it to you just so you know.
So Jim Cramer on February 8th talks about how the stock's undervalued, how it has room to run, is his quote. It was at $320.
Here's, watch this. Just
Okay, watch this.
Put the audio so we can hear it.
It's the Jim Cramer.
All right, we're gonna skip past here because MSNBC likes to do copyright strikes.
Cat bounce.
But he's right. But here's why this is significant.
Yeah.
Because this draws attention to SVB. Now, whether you want to think of it as or not, now people start digging in. And as people dig in, what do they see? They see this 15 billion in unrealized losses that they didn't have to report. But now you dig in, and what do they start telling their clients? They start telling your clients, hey, you know what? This bank is vulnerable. I'd probably take my money out of there. And as deposits start now cascading out of there, this is where they have to raise money. They go to raise 21 billion, and they do because they have to. But how do they do it? They sell some of their assets. Now, when you sell those 21 billion, they cherry pick them. Only 2 billion in losses, but now you have to realize those losses, right? So when people look under the hood, they say there's another 13 billion in unrealized losses. People out money in droves. They can't make stock. They can't issue stock, and this is how it happens.
Let me just give some of the stats. If you can show have the.
So, and those, you know, the investment capital people that they're talking about, Colin, that's Peter Thiel, you know, and you know, that's mainly who they're referencing. He's catching a lot of flack for causing this or scaremongering or whatever. He's just doing his fiduciary duty to his clients and making sure that he's, you know, bringing them up to speed on a risk that he sees.
This year, 16th largest bank, 97% of the money at Silicon Valley Bank is not protected by FDIC. I've seen 93%. I've seen 97%. Whoever's right, one of the two. Either way, it's a lot of money. 12 days ago, like 13 days.
That's key too. So the FDIC insurance, that's that little sticker you see on the window at the bank every time you go. That insures everything up to $250,000 in depositor money. 93 to 97% of SVB's depositors were above that 250K. So when they're talking about the people in this bank, you know, are just the average depositors, and that's who we're going to bail out. These aren't average people. You know, I don't know a ton of people that have over $250,000 in the bank right now, just sitting there. That's not what I would call average. So don't let the talking points confuse you about who we're talking about, our customers of this bank.
Days ago, the CEO, Gregory Becker, sold 11% of his shares. Daniel Beck, the CFO, sold 32% of his holdings. CMO Michelle Draper sold 28% of her holdings, around $5.1 million. If you post a picture of Forbes just 7 days ago,
This one right here.
by the way, they took the tweet down, just so you know. That's the one I posted, but
Yeah.
they took it down. It just go to the picture I sent you. It's another one of those pictures I sent you, Rob. They should be on your phone. Go one more, right there. Look
This
at this.
one
This
right
is their tweet. This is 6
Amazing.
days ago. Proud to be on Forbes' annual ranking of America's best banks for the 5th straight year, and to also have been named the publication inaugural Financial All-Stars list. They tweeted this. I retweeted. They took it down because they obviously, I'm sure a lot of people were retweeting this. This was all over the place. They don't want people to see. Just 5 days ago, you were thinking about this. So this becomes the question. There's a terminology called front run.
So, and that's key. They're talking about the executives at SVP. They all sold a bunch of stock leading up to this. They declared it in January per the SEC guidelines. They, any board member has to declare when they're going to sell large portions of stock. So they did declare it in January, but they've probably known at this bank for 2 to 3 quarters at this point in time that they were in trouble. At least 2 since the interest rates started going up, because the bonds they had bought in on as soon as Jay Powell started raising the interest rates, they were in trouble.
Running, right? You know what front running is. If you can pull up the definition of front running, let's just read the exact definition. The practice by market makers of dealing on advanced information provided by their brokers and investment analysis before their clients have been given the information. Okay, this is if an investor does this. What's worse is when you're in it, you're the guy that knows what's about to happen and you do it. Isn't this a crime, Tom, to do something like this?
I'm on that page. I like to see an investigation. I'll tell you why. I am right here with Barry. By the way, great to see you today. Good to see you, brother. Is on March 1st, Becker was at an event in Los Angeles, and he said, "We pride ourselves on being the best financial partner in the most challenging times." He said that, but he said that, and then he was heading to London, where he was going to go.
Form of insider trading is what front runner.
But this is even worse though. Like what Nancy Pelosi and her husband
So we definitely need an
accused of
investigation
is
into
insider
these
trading. What a lot of these
executives
Congress people. How are you
selling
worth
their
140
stock
million?
early.
If this is an area you want to get into, nearly 600,000 members are already taking advantage of Masterworks.
April 29th till January. Tom, am I right on that?
That's exactly right.
Okay.
8 consecutive months.
8 consecutive months. So they did not have a chief. Why did you not replace your chief risk officer?
Yeah, so no chief risk officer for the company from April of 2022 until I think they said February of 2023, which is insane. Just absolutely insane.
They did not. And by the way,
Laura Izurieta stepped down from her role as CRO in April of 22.
Yeah. So now your chief risk
You
officer.
pull that up.
But wait a second.
To me, how somebody can operate without a CRO.
It is, and we came from insurance for people that are listening, and we had Patrick had put, even though we were a FMO, very large nationwide FMO, Pat included in the
If you discount it enough to make things balance out. So at a discount, they'll buy it. But meanwhile, that's the $15 billion that they had in losses. So it wasn't always 15 billion. As rates were going up, maybe it was 1 billion, maybe it was 2 billion. That's the time where you could put hedges, you could put puts, you can unlever some of that. That's what the chief risk officer should have been doing.
And they've been living for so long under ZIRP, right? Zero interest rate, policy. And to buy for a bank, think about it. On the balance sheet, they were holding it as marked to maturity.
Adam, I think what you were asking.
So
Responsibility.
that was a key part right there. So what they're doing with these bonds is they're holding them as what's called marked to maturity. So the way a bond works, it has a set amount of time that you're supposed to hold it. If you hold it that entire time, it pays a guaranteed amount of interest. So a bond technically can't lose you money if you hold it for the entire time. The problem is when you have to sell it early, it has to be sold on the market, which is controlled by, market forces. And that's what happened to them. When the new bonds came out that had higher interest rates, it devalued their bonds for anything other than holding them to maturity. Well, on your books, you only have to mark them as hold to maturity, which they should be marked as hold to market. That would save a lot of issues here if these banks had to calculate their current risk on their investments instead of this fake number that is never going to actually happen, because by definition, if you're using depositor money to buy these bonds, you're never going to hold it for 20 years to get to the maturity of the bond. It's just not going to happen. So let's keep going here.
Goes on who? If you think about this, the conversation we're having on the spaces was, okay, whose fault is this? You know, because right now they're not calling it a bailout. They're calling it what?
It's just a backstop.
A backstop.
And by the way, bondholders are probably
Yeah.
screwed. Shareholders are probably screwed. We're protecting the
That's
people that
great, too.
deposited.
But it's
It's
not a
a-
bailout.
it's a
You know,
backstop.
Right.
she's
Not a
not. He's
bailout.
not a snitch. You know, it's not a bailout. So
it's a bailout.
It's a bailout. You can look what Yellen says here on page 3. Yellen says no bailout for Silicon Valley Bank. We're not going to do that again. Treasury Secretary Yellen stated that the federal government will not provide a bailout to Silicon Valley Bank.
Out of this thing, and it'll just be our shareholders and bondholders that get screwed. So
I agree with Tom 100%. I just want to point out a couple of things
So
on Yellen. So
the plan that the government is taking right now is a little bit different than the whole too big to fail in 2008. In 2008, they bailed out the the shareholders of the companies. They bailed out the executives of the companies and the depositors. Right now, they're only bailing out the depositors. But like I said, if you remember back, like we were talking about a little bit ago, 93 to 97% of the depositors at Silicon Valley Bank were in excess of the FDIC $250 or $250,000 insurance. So these aren't your average mom and pop depositors. Sure, they're small businesses. These are their liquid assets, which go towards payroll and stuff like that. But companies fail all the time. The government didn't have a problem putting hundreds of hundreds of thousands of companies out of business throughout the whole COOF lockdowns. There was no problem with that. But now all of a sudden, when it's all the Silicon Valley tech startups, tech bro mafia that is looking at losing their money, and their, left coast California constituent workers are going to be out of work. Now we got to make sure that people aren't losing their jobs. Like it's a fucking joke. It really is. When all the trade jobs were going away, there was the whole learn to code thing, and now that the coders are in trouble, no one's telling them to learn to weld. The government's rushing in to save them. So it's fucking crap.
Friday, she said the banking sector is resilient. That's almost like a Baghdad Bob comment, kind of like, there's nothing going on here, right?
Nothing to see
Nothing to
here,
see,
guys.
right.
because we make sure it's resilient.
Right. And now
Inflation's just transitory.
it's transitory.
Nothing
Exactly.
to see here, guys.
So then what happens is on Sunday morning, she says there's no shot of a bailout. I guess somebody must have pulled her over on the side.
Support between Sachs, Ackman, Vivek
So-
Ramaswamy, and a lot of other people, right? Okay.
all
I wanna
heavyweights.
get-
Oh, no, it's fine. It's all heavyweights, but now here
Spot up
comes
that's really interesting,
somebody.
where
Fathers,
they talk about
Government, Social Security, and you should, because that's what's affecting you directly, right? So
They
I'm not
talk
judging the
about
people that have money in
Jamie
Silicon Valley Bank,
Dimon,
but it is a
the
right
CEO
criticism
of-
to say you want to be
Oh.
protected, but you go take all the risk. So what does this teach? So imagine in life how you create
mind's
resentment for kids.
failing
I got
right
4 kids.
now. Goldman Sachs.
If I
think
discipline my oldest
Oh.
son more than
he was offering
this
these
note that the
companies that
COO
they're saying weren't going
of
to be able to make
Shopify-
their payroll, stuff like that. He was offering to bring them over, give them interest-free loans at the amount of their payroll costs, and keep them afloat until they got this figured out. So it wasn't like nothing was gonna. It wasn't like nothing was gonna. Like, these companies had no options. There was market options to help the depositors out. No market participants wanted to buy the bank itself.
Send that. Can you show the COO Shopify? If you can read I'm going to read this message to you right there. Check this out. Go back one, the other way. There you go. Zoom
There
in.
you go.
Hello, this is Kaz, Shopify COO. Reaching out. I know that we've already sent you an email. Your Shopify payments payout going out to SVB and asking you to change your account on file. Please do that. I'm reaching out to also offer something else. If your funds are locked up and you have trouble hitting payroll, please let me know. We'll immediately open up a balance account for you and fund it with the amount of money of your payroll so you can pay your people. Don't worry about signing anything now. We'll get lawyers to get paper things later. We won't charge you interest. We want to help you pay us back with no interest when you're. This is capitalism. So this is what I mean by a Jamie Dimon sees and says, okay, SVB Bank.
Yeah, so that's like really key there. So these depositors had options. The people that you hear MSNBC and CNN talking about, they weren't going to be able to make payroll come Friday and this and that. They had options. They had plenty of other free market options where they had, that was Shopify guy, they had Jamie Dimon reaching out, offering them 0 interest loans to keep them afloat, to keep them liquid until, you know, they could either free up some other funds, because no one had 100% of their money in the bank. I think the highest percentage I heard was like 40 something percent of their free cash was in SVB. And I think that was Roblox had almost 47% of their free cash in there. But even then, it's still not even half. They have other free cash. They just have to move stuff around. So when you have Jamie Dimon and you have Shopify offering to give them these temporary interest-free loans, like there are options out there. It's not what this is about. This is about the government. This is about the Biden administration bailing out their buddies out in Silicon Valley who censor conservatives, who keep, put their finger on the scale in our modern discourse to favor the Republicans or to favor the Democrats. So that's what this is about. This is just them bailing out their buddies.
Bank. You want to be irresponsible and reckless. You want to get an award and then come back. There is a reason why this morning. Can you pull up the one with the I get an email this morning from Goldman, first thing in the morning, and I'm like, what's this email all about? That one right there. Zoom in. Look at this. They rate banks, the GSIB. You have to know what GSIB stands for. GSIB stands for Global Systematic something. Here, let me read.
Important banks.
So, hold on. They get
important banks. That's exactly what GSIB stands for.
It's a cousin to CFA or whatever.
Yeah, it's called.
Strong, but they shouldn't be regulated.
This is where they address.
So when you see this, your understanding, if either one of you guys, Barry or Tom, what was the cause of Dodd-Frank? We know what happened under Obama, Barack Obama. What was the cause of? It's on the podcast. No, we kind of like to see both sides of the argument.
So this argument
they
bring
is
up
this whole situation
the
in
Trump
Silicon Valley
argument
Bank
where
is
they're
Trump's
blaming
fault.
Trump.
If you can play this clip.
The legislation I'm signing today rolls back the crippling Dodd-Frank regulations that are crushing community banks and credit unions nationwide. They were in such trouble. One size fits all. Those rules just don't work. And community banks and credit unions should be regulated the same way. And you have to really look at this. They should be regulated the same way with proviso for safety as in the past when they were vibrant and strong. But they shouldn't be regulated the same way as the large, complex financial institutions. And that's what happened. And they were being put out of business one by one. And they weren't lending. Since its passage in 2010, Dodd-Frank has dealt a huge blow to community banking. As a candidate, I pledged that we would rescue these community banks from Dodd-Frank, the disaster of Dodd-Frank. And now we are keeping that commitment, and all of the people with me are keeping that commitment. We passed and signed a record number of bills terminating
you can stop at this point. So when you see this, your understanding, if either one of you.
Right, now pay a lot of attention real quick because they're going to really break it down on why Dodd-Frank wouldn't have even prevented this. And if you notice one thing, when Trump was speaking right there, he says this is done to help community banks. SVB was not a community bank. They were a regional bank. There's 3 levels of banking in the US. There's the national banks, which is the big 4. Then there's regional banks, which they go over in this podcast. I forget how many, but it's less than 20 in the whole country of regional banks. And then there's the community banks, which are the banks you see in your neighborhood that have 1 or 2 branches and stuff like that. So the cuts in regulation that Trump did were aimed at the community bank, the smallest level of banking in our system, not the regional banks.
You guys, Barry or Tom, what was the cause of Dodd-Frank? We know what happened under Obama, Barack Obama. What was the cause of Dodd-Frank? And at the same time, what credibility do you give to what Midas Touch and some of these guys are talking about, saying if Trump wouldn't have deregulated some of these regulations in Dodd-Frank, this would have never happened with Silicon Valley Bank?
It wasn't because the loans were not performing. It wasn't because of bad investment. It was a duration mismatch. It happened because the Fed went about a course to raise rates in an unsustainable manner without thinking about unintended consequences. If these would have been investments that were turning up bad, that's one thing. And then you could say, okay, the fact that what was done here, and I believe that it isn't spoken about in this clip, but I believe what they're discussing here is when he rolled back the reserve requirement of how much you'd have to keep for a small bank, where it was removed. That's the reserve requirement, so that those banks could invest that money and wind up making more profitability, which gave them options. It made for more competition. So I'm not saying right or wrong. I'm just trying to outline it because I don't think that really displays what the ruling was that he removed. So if these were bad loans that went bad, well, then you could go back to this clip and said, you know what? If you would have had more stringent rules and they made less investments, maybe they would have been smarter investments. Okay.
Yeah, see, so the stuff he did prevented taking up bad loans. They didn't buy up, high risk mortgage loans. They didn't do stuff like that. They bought government bonds, which are considered to any financial expert like risk free basically, because like I said, if you hold them till maturity, you're guaranteed to earn a profit if you hold them to maturity. So they weren't buying bad credit. The issue was the Fed raising the interest rates and devaluing the bonds that they had.
But the investments were good. It just was a duration mismatch that wasn't managed.
Tom, what would you say about that?
The two things. First of all, the game when you have a weak leader in the White House is to blame predecessor. So trains are getting derailed. Oh, Trump changed a ruling.
And that the other part that's key is remembering that they didn't have a CRO, a chief risk officer. So without a chief risk officer, as the Fed's been raising interest rates for the last 8 months, 12 months almost, there's no one at the bank saying, hey, what's going on here? Why, we got a problem, because as these interest rates are going up, our bonds that we own are being devalued. We need to hedge this. So if they'd have had that CRO to be watching everything, they'd have been able to hedge this, 2 quarters ago, and everything, probably squeaked by. But the fact that they didn't have anyone watching it, and the company itself was more worried about social justice and woke politics and everything else. You can go out and search the marketing videos they've put out talking about wanting to end the Latino wage gap and bring, business loans to traditionally unlendable clients in the Black and brown communities. They're out there. You can find them. It's pretty ugly. So, well, I've been on here now for 31 minutes. I just wanted to kind of do a test stream, see how my internet held up, see how my software is working. I appreciate everyone that came on. I'm going to go ahead and end it here. I see someone else just hopped on, so I apologize. But yeah, I've been going for about 30 minutes. I just wanted to do something short tonight, test it out. So I appreciate it. Everybody stopping by. And I'm going to start trying to get a regular schedule going with these things, try to, figure this out as I go, get a little better. But the podcast is going to be called This Is Not a Test. So, make sure you have notifications on. I appreciate the support. Let's grow on this together. So, all right. Thank you guys. That's going to be it.